Hello, listeners. Welcome to Voiceover Work on this beautiful April 15th, 2025. We're thrilled to present you with a new audiobook sample for your listening pleasure as we approach or confront tax day. Thinking in Algorithms by Albert Rutherford is an eye-opening read that offers a fresh perspective on everyday challenges. This book is like having a personal coach guide you towards better decision-making, showing you how to harness the power of algorithms for a more productive and fulfilling life. If you're tired of feeling stuck or overwhelmed with your tasks, Rutherford's unique approach will empower you to take control, providing simple yet effective strategies inspired by computer science principles. It's like having a secret weapon.
Humans are strange creatures. We often do things that don't make sense, sometimes even to ourselves. What makes us more willing to purchase a product for $4.99 than for $5? Why do we get items for 50% off that we would never buy at full price? And what makes us so eager to use products celebrities use when we have nothing in common? Many of our decisions in life are seemingly random or based on whims, but even our most illogical actions are formulaic. As Dan Ariely says in his book, Predictably Irrational, these irrational behaviors of ours are neither random nor senseless. They are systematic, and since we repeat them again and again, predictable. Ariely is a psychology and behavioral economics professor at Duke University, a field of study that focuses on answering questions just like those we've posed. Researchers like Ariely have discovered the patterns behind our senseless habits by studying the effects of psychological, social, cognitive, and emotional factors on our economic decisions. Behavioral economics not only teaches us about how our emotions, feelings, and biases affect our shopping, but our entire lives. The truth about our gut feeling. We often talk about our gut feeling as this visceral, spur-of-the-moment urge to go in a certain direction or make a particular choice, an impulse towards doing what we feel is right. Similarly, we might tell someone to listen to their heart as a way of following their passions and desires, using their emotions to do what's best. Yet we also tell people just as often to use their head. We think of using logic and using emotion to make decisions as separate ideas when they go hand in hand. As behavioral economics and psychology have discovered, it's next to impossible to decide without using our feelings and biases. Our heads often defer to our hearts to help make quick choices. Modern research and technology have looked into the brain and found it comprises a messy network of overlapping emotional and rational sections. Whether we like it or not, our rationality has been tainted by our feelings, where the two are impossible to extricate. When comparing properties, making pros and cons lists may be the logical way of looking at things, but a feeling of home will usurp them every time. We may crunch the numbers to see if we can afford those new shoes we've been eyeing, but if we believe they'll bring us enough happiness, our minds will be made up, no matter what our calculations say. Even when we think we're making a logical choice, emotional impulses will seize control of situations and steer us in illogical directions. Our gut often hotwires our decisions and takes them on a joyride to buy things for a rush of dopamine despite our empty wallets, or to go on a date with an attractive person we know isn't good for us. When we leap to conclusions and grab for the nearest solution or craving, we're not cutting out our brains completely. There's no way to be that carefree. Instead, our minds recognize that they must find a quick solution and speed up the process of decision-making to the degree that we might not even be able to follow. This isn't some miraculous hyper-speed thinking function, but a simple process of shortcuts. We've developed these shortcuts, known as heuristics, as a survival mechanism that enables us to act more efficiently during a life or death situation. But as we've evolved, it's become a less beneficial part of our everyday lives. Now we use quick thinking to make decisions about things that have no dire consequences or any consequences at all, like choosing whether we should get lettuce or spinach at the grocery store, or picking out the next book we want to read from our shelf. Although heuristics speed up our thinking processes and work fine for inconsequential choices, they do so by creating corner-cutting habits that can be too simplistic for our own good. Our brain's inefficiency mode. The more our society has grown and flourished, the more we have available to us. More entertainment, relationships, connectivity, knowledge, and more options. In fact, we have too many options. From the time we get up to the moment we fall asleep, we ask ourselves to decide on almost every minute of the day, sometimes more. But for the most part, we don't notice these choices taking place. Our brains have gotten used to finding ways to function entirely without interfering with the flow of our day. Like a server running in the background of a computer setup, our brains store, sort, process, and draw on information from previous experiences. This Rolodex of information allows our minds to be ready with conclusions to our questions before or quickly after they arise. This way, our day's flow isn't disturbed. Our brains are like great warehouses of information. And when the boss, us, asks for a file, it's just too much work to run to the other end. Instead, the poor employee grabs for a nearer drawer. It might not have the exact or most correct answer the boss was looking for, but it's satisfactory enough that the job is considered finished. Maybe it's a B+ or a C+ type of answer, but it's good enough, and the employee is left off the hook. Our brains don't just do this to make us happy. They do it to save energy. We only have so much brain power to give to decision-making every day, so we have to make sure that we save it up for the important stuff. There's no need to waste our fuel deciding what shoe goes on which foot or how to drive a car when we can put those actions on autopilot. If we gave our all to everything we had to choose in life, it would be like taking every possible road on how to work. We'd run out of gas long before we reached our destination. We think of many of these skills and habits as naturally occurring instincts that we've always had, but that's not true. Once upon a time, we had to learn them. Some were intrinsic, like breathing, while others were difficult to discover and build, like riding a bike, but over time they became second nature. We didn't need to think about them anymore. These processes that allow us to do our routine activities run in the background of our brain, so we can focus on other things. The more we can put our skills on autopilot, the more complex ideas and complicated actions we can take on. When we save our energy on minor problems, we can put that extra fuel towards more important uses and questions, like figuring out the steps we need to take to further our career, deciding which relationships are worth holding on to, or pondering our purpose and motivations in life. Usually, this ability to save energy serves us well. It enables us to go about our daily activities with little effort or strain, but sometimes the habit simplifies decision-making too much. It leads us to make choices that aren't as logical as our brains might like us to believe. Thanks to the research of behavioral economics, psychology, and neuroscience, we've come to understand many biases and shortcuts our brains use to make these leaps, and the better we understand them, the better we can combat them and move beyond them to more complex and rational forms of thinking. Relative advantage and absolute terms. When we make decisions, we often struggle to compare unlike or abstract things. Despite our irrational natures, our brains try their best to produce logical and critical thinking. They prefer concepts that can be nailed down, like comparing the cost of a $50 item to a $45 item, or a score of 95% on a test versus a score of 86%. One is better or cheaper than the other. Their relativity to one another is clear and tangible. But choices in life are rarely so uncomplicated. Imagine you're looking for a gift for your friend's wedding. You find the perfect item at a store nearby for around $50. It's more than you'd like to spend, but you decide that it's worth it because it's something you know they'll love. Before you get in the car, you remember that a similar store is having a sale one town over. You check and see that the item is in stock for $35. Would you go to the further store or the nearer store? Chances are you'd drive the few extra miles. The numerical values of $35 and $50 are easy to compare. One is cheaper than the other. But this considers only one variable, price. You haven't factored in the time spent driving or the gas needed to get there. These elements make the decision too complicated. For an easily comparable sum, the problem turns into a three-part formula, some aspects of which are abstract in value, such as the worth of your time. We usually make choices about whether an item is worth it in one of two ways. When we see that a product has increased or decreased in value, such as by going on sale, and decide whether to buy it based on this, we're judging it based on absolute terms. We're comparing it only with itself. However, this method is flawed. We have no true assessment of its worth, except for the happenstance of its cost when we first encountered it. The product's value may be its sale price, its original price, or something else altogether, but we can't know that value for sure, so we base it off what information we have. However, more often we use another form of reasoning. When we compare an item to like items, such as a name brand and store brand, we are assessing its relative advantage by comparing it to similar or substitute products. When we get suckered into buying a new and improved version of something, we assume that the higher priced version of the same item is of higher quality. If we choose the cheap knockoff, we assess the product's relative advantage in terms of cost and benefit. Although this suggests more data than absolute terms, it doesn't tell us the product's true value, but it does give us context. Our brain prefers and therefore seeks easier comparisons and calculations. We're more likely to buy something for $4.99 than $5. We're more ready to get something on sale. Numerical values make decisions easier to understand and explain. We can see the difference between two numbers, their relative value, and assess which one is better based on our chosen comparison variable, i.e., price. Sometimes using relative advantage will help us to see what's best in our spread of options. We don't know whether the first car we test drive is the best until we test a few others and see how they compare. But sellers and marketers can also take advantage of the way we compare rather than calculate. Take, for instance, a showroom with 3 cars. A salesman walks you through the display to see the 3 options, which are all mid-sized vehicles that fit your needs. One is listed at $30,000, another at $50,000, and the third at $80,000. Which do you go for? Most of the time, the buyer will go for the middle option. The lower option seems too cheap compared to the other two, but $80,000 seems like it's too much to pay when you could get something similar for less. The salesperson knows this and will place a car they're looking to sell with 2 other options of lesser and higher values on purpose to make it seem like the best deal based on relative advantage. Imprinting, or the anchoring effect. Another issue we have with our reasoning is the undue importance we place on prior experiences. Too often, when we believe we're being logical and basing our choices on facts, we're just using our memories and biases to conclude. Konrad Lorenz discovered this phenomenon while raising geese. When the goslings hatched, Lorenz realized that baby birds would attach themselves or imprint on the closest figure available if the duck mother was absent. But this wasn't a temporary arrangement. It was an initial reaction that led to a permanent connection to the figure as a parent, no matter what it may be, Lorenz concluded. We create similar relationships to products, using our first impressions and experiences with objects to deem their worth. In behavioral economics terms, this is called anchoring. If you see an item for the first time at $500 and the next time see that it's $400, you'll think the newer price must be a good deal. It doesn't matter whether the item's actual worth is $1,000 or $40. This is why you'll hear older generations bemoaning the cost of gas and milk prices. As inflation caused prices to rise, their perception of the worth of a product stayed the same. If they grew up with gas being $1 a gallon, the price would always seem high when it's over $1. One day, we'll also be saying things like, "Back in my day, iPhones cost $1,000, because it's how the technology was introduced to us. Herd mentality. Society influences our decision-making. Making choices because everyone else is doing it isn't the most logical, but when we see something as popular, we want to hop on the trend. Over 20,000 five-star reviews can't be wrong, and a long line of people can't be waiting around for nothing, right? And besides, it's much easier to go with the decision-making of other people than it is to make choices for ourselves. This is called herd mentality, and it's a troublesome phenomenon that has only become more difficult to avoid with social media and the internet. Herding behavior can have great importance with stocks, but it's also an incredibly interesting part of human nature and monkey nature. Michael Platt, a professor of neuroscience at the University of Pennsylvania, used cards with different shapes to study the decision-making of monkeys. His team found that monkeys in the presence of other monkeys were more likely to choose the same option as the first monkey when presented with several cards than those who chose alone. This is similar to the Asch conformity experiment of 1951, a test that asked participants to compare several lines to a target line and select the closest in length. However, the participants were placed in groups of people who were told to pick a particular wrong answer. The Asch experiment discovered that during several trials, the participants would become less sure of their own beliefs and start to choose the line everyone else was choosing. Platt found that herd mentality relates to the social network of our brains, that part of our mind that recognizes the importance of others, leading us to analyze and mimic the actions of others. Conforming is a type of survival mechanism. Standing out is more dangerous than giving up our individuality and fitting in. We're hardwired to avoid ostracization and prefer social acceptance. Our emotional mind. Whether it's because of our emotions, past experiences, or other people's influence on us, our logical thinking often goes astray, but we can't blame our brains for being misled by our emotional impulses. It's the way they're wired to work. Our emotions are the most straightforward and most accessible part of our brains to latch onto with decision-making. Emotions are the first line of defense when a question arises. To make the best decisions would require going deeper into our mental capacities and using our more critical facilities. It would mean putting in much effort. Emotional thinking comes to us naturally, while rational decision-making is learned. It requires intention and skill. Critical thinking only comes to us when we practice it repeatedly, making it a habit. Emotions aren't the enemy, but they aren't reliable when used alone. We can take back control of our seemingly irrational behaviors by improving our rational thinking and questioning our decisions. Do I think about this logically or through the lens of past experiences? Why am I doing this? And what factors are guiding my hand? To make sure that we're taking both aspects of thinking into account and start making rational thinking the norm rather than the exception, we can produce and use formulas for thinking and decision-making to replace those we have that rely on biases and shortcuts. Exercise. Take a day to reflect on your own decision-making. Sit down and think about what choices you made on a given day, whether it was a decision to buy something, eat something, talk to someone, or some big life-altering choice. Then, Think about these questions. Do you feel regret about the choice you made or wish you could do it over? What factors helped determine your choice, such as other people's opinions, price, previous experiences, etc.? Now that you're warmed up, think about some bigger decision-making you've done in the past and answer the questions below, whether in your head or on a piece of paper. Take a moment to reflect on your own economic decision-making by writing down your 5 biggest purchases in life and asking yourself these questions about each. Do you think they were worth it? Did they bring you the desired result, whether it was happiness, change, forward movement, etc.? What factors helped determine your choice? Did you compare it to other options to assess its value? Would you still buy the item today were you to have the option? Why or why not? What are your 5 biggest regrets in life? Why do you regret those decisions? What made you make those decisions in the first place? Why did you believe they were a good idea? What are 5 traits you dislike about yourself, e.g., stubbornness, procrastination, etc.? Why do you dislike these traits?
And there you have it. Another insightful episode of Voice Over Work coming to a close. Today we explored some fascinating insights from Albert Rutherford's book, Thinking in Algorithms, which emphasizes the importance of combining computer analysis with human creativity. We learned that rational decision-making is a skill that needs practice and intention, and that critical thinking becomes natural when it's consistently applied. Emotions are an integral part of who we are, but they shouldn't be our sole guide for decisions. By asking ourselves questions like, am I being logical or relying on past experiences? And what factors are influencing my choices? We can take charge of our thoughts and behaviors. Remember, as human beings, we have an incredible capacity for learning and improvement. By adopting a growth mindset and continually challenging ourselves to think critically, we can achieve great things. So keep practicing your critical thinking skills. And don't forget to check out Thinking in Algorithms by Albert Rutherford, available on Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. You can also visit the author's website at albertrutherford.com. Until next time, continue seeking knowledge and keep those creative juices flowing. Here's a quote to inspire you. The key to growth is the introduction of higher dimensions of consciousness into our awareness. Lao Tzu.